Pressman, and I'm the Executive Director for Contact Rape Crisis Center. We provide services to victims of sexual assault and stalking in a four-county area of southwestern West Virginia: Cabell, Wayne, Mason, and Lincoln counties. Uh, Contact has been providing services to sexual assault victims since the mid-'80s and has been a 501c3 nonprofit offering services for lots of various things since 1970. And so we've been around a long time. We're funded by some federal grant money, a little bit of state money, and a lot of donations and local foundations, local grants, local things. All of our services are free and confidential. We don't charge for anything that we do. We are supported by, our offices are supported by a local church, so we have no overhead as far as our rent. We're lucky to have that as an in-kind donation from Trinity Episcopal Church in Huntington. We have a satellite office in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where we have a full-time advocate. We have 3 advocates located in the Huntington office. We have a SART coordinator located in the Huntington office, and that stands for the Sexual Assault Response Team for Cabell County, and that's a federal grant. And the SART team meets monthly to coordinate services for victims in Cabell County, so that it's a victim-centered approach for victims to receive services, so that it's hopefully less trauma for them if people who are providing services are working together. We also have a prevention education coordinator who works the 4 counties, but primarily in Cabell County, but she does do some services in some of the other counties as well. And she works with school-aged children in preventing sexual abuse, safe internet safety, anti-bullying programming. So she is in the schools or after-school programs or with scouts or wherever she can find a group of young people to talk to, sometimes in the high schools, doing prevention work. And that's also a federally funded program for us. We've had an educator for almost 20 years doing prevention education. We provide services to victims of sexual violence. We can be in the hospital emergency rooms with them if they're getting a sex crimes kit completed for forensic evidence for sexual assault that may have occurred. We have a 24-hour hotline that we have both an 800 number and a local number for victims to call us 24/7. And this is very often utilized by victims who were sexually assaulted from a few days ago to many years ago, because healing from sexual violence is a very long and can be a very traumatic road. And so we have a trained advocate or volunteer available to talk any time of the day or night if they just need someone to talk to, if they need advice, if they need services, just information, just somebody to help them calm down so they can get back to sleep. So that's a service that we have available. We also provide services to stalking victims. Our services to stalking victims, Liz is going to talk a little bit about that and what our services for stalking victims are. Again, those services are completely free and confidential, and we can work with law enforcement, we can work with the victim directly themselves, or with the victim's families, should the families need services. So we run the gamut of providing services to victims of sexual assault and stalking, from the hospital to follow up with them. Perhaps they need help with housing or clothing or something related to their work environment, court cases, law enforcement interviews, wherever they need us. We have some victims that we've been serving for years. They'll need us maybe a lot in the beginning, and then we'll go a period of time without hearing from them or without them needing us. and then they'll call back and something's come up, or their case is finally going to be heard in court, or if it's a stalking case, maybe the stalker hasn't been around for a certain period of time and now they're back in their life. So we have some victims that we've been providing services and support. I like to say support because that's really what we're doing. We're supporting them in whatever's going on in their life at any given time. We're their support. And sometimes we don't even know their full names. We might be providing them services without ever really seeing them. If they need us to come, if they need to see us somewhere, if they need to come in, or we need to meet them somewhere, we'd be happy to do that as well. So there's a lot of ins and outs and a lot of different ways that we can support victims of sexual assault and stalking.
When a person could be stalked by someone who's a former partner. It's probably the most common situation. They can be stalked by a stranger, someone they have had no contact with, or just an acquaintance. And stalking is like sexual assault. It's about power and control. That person keeps you on edge. That person lets you know in ways subtle and not so subtle that they have the power over you by knowing where you are, by getting into your life. It can erode your self-confidence, and certainly stalking is frightening. And a person feels very alone and isolated. So one of the first things we do is listen to the person who calls us and says, I think I'm being stalked. And our first response is to believe them. Whatever they tell us, our first response is to believe them, and not to minimize their experience, but to take it seriously. Because the stalking issues, the stalking behaviors seem like normal behavior sometimes. Driving down the street is a normal behavior. Going to the gym is a normal behavior. Sending text messages or making phone calls are all normal legal behaviors. But added together in a pattern, they become stalking when the person becomes frightened. So our first thing is to believe them, to not minimize what they're experiencing, to take it seriously, and to help them assess how frightened they are and how much danger they feel they're in, and what are some ways that we can help them feel more safe, feel more secure, be more safe, and take control of their lives back. Because we can't control what the stalker does. We can only control our response to it. And that's a really big thing, because when you're in a power struggle and someone effectively tells you, you have no power, I have all the power, it helps to have an outsider remind you that there are things you can do. So one of the first things we do is, after we believe them, is kind of assess where they are, what's going on, how dangerous does this person seem based on past behavior, based on their current behavior, and does the person being stalked feel like they would like to go the legal route and try to get a protection order? So we'll assess, these are the requirements for that. This is how to fill out the paperwork. We'll go with you to the magistrate's office. In West Virginia, you would go to the magistrate's office and to file for an emergency protection order. There are two different kinds. A lot of people don't know this, and not every state has this option. If you are being stalked or harassed or in fear from someone that is in your household, either a former partner, current partner, you can get a domestic violence protection order. If you are being stalked and harassed and threatened and feel afraid of someone who you're not in that situation with, maybe a stranger, maybe a coworker, or maybe someone too extended, related to a friend of a friend, you can get a personal safety protection order. There are two different kinds of orders. And you have that option. It's not an option everywhere. That's an option in West Virginia now. So we'll help them fill out the paperwork. We'll be with them in that hearing, in that initial application when the emergency hearing comes to see whether it'll be finalized. We'll go with them if they want, and we don't give advice. As Sharon said, we give support. So we're emotional support, we're physical support, and we're practical support, and we're a buffer. And sometimes we're a good buffer, and we can help be a go-between if they need it, between themselves and law enforcement or the magistrate or the prosecutors and anybody in the court system, because they've never done this before, I hope. They've never had to do this before. And they felt very alone. And this time, they don't have to feel alone. They have someone there who can walk with them through it. Every case is different, so it's not like I can say, oh, yes, we've done this. It's all very routine and cut and dry. And it's not. Every single case has a different twist to it. And every person who is victimized is a different person and has different thresholds of fear, different capabilities. And so we try to encourage them to do as much for themselves as they can. Again, it's that part of recovery is taking control of your life. So we try to do that. Another thing we do is we give them what we call a stalking. We call it the shorthand a stalking kit. It's a stalking response kit, and that has information about keeping yourself safer when there are no guarantees. We can't guarantee that this is a quick fix. It helps people to feel safer, and it helps people to keep track and collect evidence for if they are going to file incident report with the police or apply for a protection order. These are two things that help people feel safer. One is like a personal alarm. Some of them have a whistle. Some have this little beeper. It's very loud. And some pepper spray, which is a non-lethal way of trying to buy yourself time to get out of what feels like a dangerous situation. We talk about how to use these defensively and safely. They're not an offensive weapon. But just knowing you have it helps people feel more secure. They have the thought, okay, well, I will have some kind of recourse if someone comes after me. And so these can help you to feel safer. This is really for, and the other third piece, is the stalking safety tips. So it's just some very practical, very matter-of-fact suggestions about ways to keep yourself safer by varying your routine, by staying with, not isolating yourself, building your circle of people who can support you. And then on the whole, we all live our lives online. What do we do to keep ourselves safe online and private without feeling like we have to live in a closet? So, and there are ways to do that, because if we disappear altogether, it's not practical. We can't really disappear altogether, and then we've given some power away. So to be able to say, I live my life, but you don't have to know everything that's going on in my life, and I can control the message. That's a big part of that empowerment and growth and recovery. So for building the case, as it were, because stalking is defined in most states as a course of behavior that would cause a reasonable person to be in fear for their safety. That's a roughly that would cover most states and the federal definition. But it's a repeated action, so it's not a one-time event. It has to keep happening. So, and to say, well, this happened a lot of times, it doesn't always seem as credible to law enforcement as being able to say, okay, I can tell you this was when this happened. It happened November 17th, it happened November 30th, it happened December 29th, and this is what happened, and this is who was there, and I did report it to the police, and this is the officer that I spoke to. So the stalking log, we think, is one of the best tools, because it helps to quantify what's going on, and it gives that person control over the event to the extent that I can record this and I can show how these things all add up. So this is a really useful tool. It's a stalking kit. And then the other thing for collecting, if there's physical evidence, we tell people, is to save anything in paper. We give you some gloves. And if you ever have to store anything that you think will have DNA in it, like cigarette butts, you want to store it in paper so it dries out rather than is moist and moldy and degrades. They can't get the DNA. That's the analysts tell us. So we have paper bags. It's very low tech, the paper bags and latex gloves. The other thing about preserving evidence is if someone is stalking me, harassing me on my phone, let's say they're sending me threatening text messages, I want it to go away. I block the person, I delete the messages. That's my natural inclination. I want it to go away. if it's rising to the level where I feel I need to go to law enforcement, I need to go to the court, and I need to prove that this person is doing that, I need those messages. So we encourage people, rather than deleting the messages, save the messages, and better yet, screenshot the messages and send them to someone else as well, so that there are easy ways that you can keep track of things. If someone posts something on Facebook or Twitter or whatever that is threatening, or that is part of this pattern of contact, unwanted contact, screenshot it, save it, send it to somebody else, because they can take it down later. The other person can take it down when you want to go back and show somebody else. So you want to collect that evidence right away. There are things we can do, and so hiding away is not always the best response. Engaging and arguing back is also not necessarily a good or safe thing to do. We encourage people to not interact as much as possible with anyone who's harassing them, and in part because some people are emboldened by that, and that's really what they want, is they want to engage. And particularly in situations where there's a relationship, there had been a previous relationship, and there was domestic violence or manipulative, it was a manipulative relationship, that opens the door for that person to start manipulating you again. So disengage, and it's surprising how powerful your silence can be. But one of the really difficult things about stalking is it really is dangerous. It really is dangerous, and it really is deadly. And we're very much aware of that. And we're very much aware of the fact that, our little kit and our pamphlets and our advice will not stop someone who is determined, and the courts and police will not stop someone who is determined to do harm no matter what. And we take that very seriously, and we help the victims to understand that that's a possibility. And that's what all of this is about, is trying to help them live their lives to the best that they can, and take that and put that threat away as much as possible, without forgetting about it or minimizing it.
Well, the legislature felt that it was a big enough issue to create laws to provide some punishment to the stalker, but also gives victims a way to report it and file a police report before there's any physical harm, because prior to the law, which was 3 years ago, I believe, in the state legislature, there had to be physical harm. And stalking is not necessarily about physical harm, although it can end in physical harm. It's more about the psychological fear and harm that a stalker can cause to someone who they are stalking. And with social media, it's become so much easier now to create fear in someone. If someone's sending you hundreds of text messages a day, you don't have to see them to feel the fear of being afraid to go to class, or being afraid to go to the grocery store, or to go out of your house. It's easy for someone now to find out your address because of there's almost no privacy anymore about where you live, what your phone number is. People can get that information without interacting with you in any way. So it's much easier to be stalked now, and I think the West Virginia legislature recognized that in providing this law. And it's taken some time, and the personal safety orders from county to county, it's a little bit different in how the magistrates respond, but it is state law, and the protective safety orders are available in all the counties in West Virginia through the magistrate's office, as Liz said earlier. And in our service area, we would be happy to go with the stalking victim. And if a victim lives outside of the 4-county area that we serve, they can call us and we can refer them to the appropriate center. There are 9 sexual assault centers in West Virginia, and even more domestic violence shelters that all have advocates. All the centers, both domestic violence and sexual assault, have advocates who can go with a victim. So it doesn't matter which county they live in. By calling us or going to our website. We have lots of information on our website, which is www.contacthuntington.com. We have access to information from around the state as well as just local information, and lots of links for services, law enforcement, prosecutors, advocates, other rape crisis centers. So that's easily accessible either by phone or through our website. So, which is updated regularly. They can also contact us through the website or through our toll-free 800 number or our local rape crisis number.
The other thing we can do is for people who are not in West Virginia, we can help them find service in the area where they live. Depending on every state is different. The laws are a little different in every state. The burden of proof is a little different in every. Certainly, the process is a little different. But an advocate is available from some kind of agency, and would certainly work with somebody out of state to help them find someone who's knowledgeable in their area to help them out.
And we can refer them to the closest person to them who can
Right.
provide those services. We have access to all of that information. So
Right.
the network is big and it's strong, and we're very interconnected with other agencies, whether they be sexual assault, domestic violence, or even other service agencies who might be able to help them with whatever their issue is.
The other thing is stalking, crossing state lines makes it a federal crime. So then you have the FBI involved in a case, and the federal punishment for stalking is much greater than most of the state punishments. So living where we do here in the tri-state area, it's very easy and not at all uncommon for someone to be stalking across the river or across the state line. So that's another thing to keep in mind, that there are other avenues, even if in your local area you're not making very good progress maybe with your local law enforcement. It might be something that rises to the level where the federal law enforcement could be involved, and that might help you out as well.
Yeah, our prevention educator has some resource materials for parents of children who might be on an internet. Kids are having phones younger and younger. It's much easier for predators to find children, and children many times are much more informed and educated in how to use social media than their parents are. So our prevention educator works with parent groups as well as children to help parents understand what some of the risks are for their children, whether they be high school age kids or elementary or middle school. It doesn't really matter. So that's really an important thing for parents to be aware of, is if you're going to give your child a phone, you need to be monitoring what's on that phone.
Or an iPad or a game console.
Yeah.
There are all kinds of ways. And I'm trying to remember the statistic. I think it's 1 in 19 women, 1 in 44 men over 18 have been victims of stalking in their lifetime. But I do remember that the numbers are higher in 12 to 18, kids 12 to 18, because of their social media lives, because of they're young, they don't really know what's going on, they think they do. Sorry, my kids. But because of their inexperience in dealing with people, they put themselves at a greater risk. And as Sharon said, parents, it's hard to keep track of what the kids are doing, and kids don't necessarily get how serious the situation can be. The other thing is kids stalk each other and torment each other online, particularly online. Also, the schoolyard bullying that we remember, those of us with white hair remember. Now you don't get away from it when you go home. When you go home, now it's online as well, and that kind of threatening behavior can rise to the level of a stalking situation.
Okay.
So it's a real concern for parents. Mm-hmm. And as Sharon said, our educator works with kids and their parents to try to give them resources and strategies for dealing with this kind of situation.
It can start out very innocently. You meet a new friend at school. Somebody sits beside you in a class, and you have some things in common, and you exchange email addresses, and then before you know it, it could be a situation that's totally out of control. That you haven't told your parents about it. Maybe your parents don't even know or checking your email. And many of the phone programs now, the packages that you can get are family packages, and parents can much more easily monitor what their younger children are accessing or not accessing in some cases online.
And the content of their text messages that you can. There are ways to do that, and through the phone company.
Now, needless to say, children are much quicker to learn how to use social media than their parents, and in some cases their grandparents are. So it's important for parents to be informed when they're giving their child access to the world. It's a great thing in one sense, but in another sense, there need to be some parameters.